For those of you who do not know Robert, I'll give you a quick background of where he's from.
I didn't get a cheat sheet.
Well, I sent it over to you this morning. Okay. So for those of you who don't know, Cargill is the largest privately owned company in the United States. Has revenue over $177 billion and 160,000 employees. Cargill's deployed over 60 PCN networks globally in just over a year and a half. Robert Greiner is Director of Platform Engineering, and he's been with Cargill for 31 years. So this gentleman has probably worked his, or has worked his way up from a plant in, where'd you start?
Eddyville, Iowa.
Eddyville, Iowa, all the way up to now leading this charge into this new technology.
Eddyville will fit in this room.
Small place. So the goal today is to kind of paint the picture of what Celona and Cargill have done together. And the funny story is I was in a room with Robert probably 3 years ago when he was beginning this kind of journey of trying to understand this new technology called, at the time, PLTE, PCN, PWN. We really didn't even know what to call it. And so I'm going to kind of fire off a few questions to Robert today and hopefully help paint the picture of the journey and what it's been. And really, you've been on this journey now for, you started 3 years ago. And I want to ask you, what are your top lessons that you've learned to date?
Well, I mean, you just got to start, so that's lesson number one is, I started a little bit before that when you and I met, but, I tell a story. There was I was kind of the IT/OT in between. I sat on the global network leadership team at Cargill, and AT&T and Verizon both come in with Industrial 4.0 presentations, and buried in that was one slide that had this, CBRS, cellular connectivity, and the networking side of Cargill was Wi-Fi's king still, and that slide resonated with me as, wow, that is something we need in the industrial space. And my networking counterparts in the corporate world was Wi-Fi is king. And when I said we should look at that, they're like, you're crazy, Griner, Wi-Fi is king. And so I kind of went off on my own and looked at it a little bit, and I hit the wall with them every time I went to them with it. And so I just started trying to figure out how I would do it. And then if you don't know, Cargill has their infrastructure outsourced to Tata Consulting Services, TCS, and they did me a great favor by going to one of our larger plants and putting Wi-Fi everywhere at about $800,000 with NTT's help. Thanks, Ryan. And that project spent a whole bunch of money that Cargill didn't think they needed to spend, and I started, they come to me, the OT people did, and said, how could you have done it better? And I said, this 5G thing could have really done a great thing. And so we started doing case studies on how we could do it cheaper, and that led us to Sydney, where I met you, and we started looking at cheaper ways of doing it. So that was really the catalyst, was a whole bunch of money spent on Wi-Fi that the company thought was frivolous spending. So not to pick on NTT, that wasn't their fault. It was a TCS, overspending fault, in my opinion.
So after you've deployed these networks now for over a year, what's your biggest surprise? What's kind of been the thing that's kind of popped out that you weren't anticipating, or was something that now that you've deployed that you've said, wow, okay, I didn't see this one coming?
Well, the funny thing was our very first deployment was a really small warehouse in New Richland, which was our corporate headquarters in Minneapolis, and some of the Celona folks was, I don't know, like 8 of you people went there or something. I'm over-exaggerating. Maybe 4 or 5 of you went there. And the Celona team's like, are you going? I'm like, I'm not going. It's a small warehouse. I'm not going to that. And I think 2 or 3 Cargill people went. And there was an engineer that went, and he'd been on some Wi-Fi deployments. And he called me, and he had the diagram from the heat map. And the cabler had missed 2 beams to where the access point needed to go. And he was reading me the riot act. He goes, Griner, this isn't going to work. This thing is on the effing wrong beam, And he goes, we're wrong here. This has to be changed before we do anything, And I'm like, oh, Christ, we're in deep, whatever. And so I called. I think Rick was there. I'm trying to get a hold of Rick, who's here today, and we're talking about it, and stuff. And Rick's like, we're walking around with a tablet, boss, and we've walked the whole inside of this place, and it's lit up. And he goes, matter of fact, we went outside and we're getting coverage outside. And I'm like, seriously? And he goes, yeah. And I go, wow, you're probably getting like a third eye or something growing somewhere, you know? And he's like, yeah, we got coverage. And so that was like the first aha moment was, you know, in Wi-Fi, I mean, when you get that heat map of where to install it, you got like a, you know, maybe a 2-foot, you know, miss of where that needs to go. And then you have that ultimate, you know, dead spot happens. Well, they missed, you know, 20 foot of where that needed to go in this warehouse, and they've got 4 pallet high stacks of product. And, you know, I have an engineer, a manufacturing engineer, mechanical engineer, whatever you want to call him, and he's having a fit about it, you know, and your product's, you know, performing, and we're walking the whole place, and, you know, we probably could have got by with 1 AP in there. So, I mean, that was one of the big aha moments of, I got my, you know, I'm like, I got something by the tail here. This is going to be a good thing for us.
You know, the one thing that I've noticed, Robert, that I find really, you know, don't take this the wrong way, but interesting, is you're launching these networks without a very specific use case. And I find that really interesting. Can you kind of explain to the audience that I think a lot of folks are building these networks with very specific and defined use cases, whereas Cargill's taking the decision of, in some cases, not decommissioning Wi-Fi, but at least being more selective in where they are swapping out Wi-Fi, and you're putting in these types of networks. Can you kind of walk us through that thought process of how you sold that internally, and just, you know, coming from somebody that is having to support these networks with no very specific use case in every case?
Well, I think we're all geeks in here, right? So, and 31 years I've been with Cargill, so I only know Cargill, I guess. Well, I worked for MCI before that, I guess, so I know a little bit previous to Cargill. I don't do work anymore. I'm not a worker. I'm just a tell them what to do guy, I guess. But previous to 5G, we did some Wi-Fi stuff. Raise your hand if you're involved in any Wi-Fi and you talk use cases. Tell me which one of you guys do, or gals. You know, you do? You talk use cases when you deploy Wi-Fi? Because I don't think you do. I think you just put Wi-Fi out there, because that's what you do. Yeah, yeah. So I don't understand why we talk use cases around private cellular. You know, pick where you need it, figure out the connectivity option, and maybe don't talk private 5G, talk connectivity. Look at your facility and say, holistically, if the group doing private cellular and the group doing wireless is different, that's wrong too. That group needs to be combined, and you need to have somebody holistically looking at your facility of what connectivity is needed. And then you decide where wireless is at, where P5G's at, where LoRaWAN's at, how they intermix with each other, where that sits at, and you come up with a plan. And then you say, you know, I'm originally from Iowa. It's the Iowa Field of Dreams. We build it, they'll come. You know, that's what you need. And then the use cases fall. But if you pick one use case and you build it and you say, I'm going to go solve this, you're over in the corner, you're doing that little thing, and then when the next thing comes along, you know, I heard it yesterday, the railroad guy says, hey, we lit up this and we got a dead spot, and now I got to go back and tell them to redo it. You know, well, that was a dead spot, you know, but when you go back to the business and you say, hey, I've put in P5G, and now they come to me and they got this new packaging line and we need to do X, Y, Z. The plant manager, he thinks you did it. He doesn't understand that, oh, we didn't do that part of the plant? What do you mean we didn't do it? You was here, Griner, you had a whole crew here, you did this thing, and now you're coming back and you want 40,000 more? Why didn't you do it when you was here? Well, because we solved that use case. You know, he's doing $1 million plant or whatever, you know, he's got money flying out the door. Just sell the whole thing to him. Do the whole enchilada. And if he's not willing to do the whole enchilada, then I don't know. Maybe you're not, you know, maybe you can't sell tea in China. But I can sell tea in China. that's my deal on it.
Hey, all right. So, I mean, I think that it's common as anybody who's in sales, it's trying to generate the ROI. And that is one thing that you and I have had the conversation early on, that the ROI, of course, is you've got to show leadership within the organization. Can you kind of walk us through how you approach the ROI discussion with your leadership?
Well, that gets tough. Okay. It's tough. But, you know, we talk about, I keep a chart of things that P5G has solved. You know, we're working with vendors on, you know, Axis has been great with their cameras, so we pull that in and we talk about, you know, Genetec's our security system, so we have the Axis cameras now, you know, certified in our security system. So we had an incident in the plant I come in at Eddyville. We had a safety incident, and now that we have a whole bunch of our BUs that say we need cameras in parking lots now at Cargill. Well, when that happened 4.5, 5 years ago, the parking lot cameras meant single mode fiber to every light pole in the parking lots and a static camera sitting on top of that, you know. Well, man, that was money that flew out the door. So, you know, the new model of that could be private cellular, Axis camera, you know. Whoa, that's a game changer. So we turn that script around, right, of, you know, hey, don't do that project. That project there alone pays for the P5G installation. And so you put that one to the side. You know, then you talk about, you know, if you're doing a Wi-Fi refresh out in an area that already had Wi-Fi out in a manufacturing area, we have 3 of our protein BU is our beef BU. We call it protein. We have 3 plants we flipped. They were 4 gigahertz, they're going to 5, and Tata said, hey, you have 40 access points in this facility out in the manufacturing area, and guess what? To go to the new Cisco, you're gonna have to add 15 more access points, not only after we refresh the 44. So, you know, I'm gonna have to run new cabling, whatever, and we're like, oh, guess what? Instead of that, we're gonna put 6, you know, P5G APs out there, and we're gonna, you know, throw the 44 away and not put the 15 new in. And, you know, so that's huge cost savings, right? So the cost of doing the Wi-Fi refresh paid for going to P5G. And, you know, so that's, you got to look for those type of things. And so we have 3 different categories of how we could put P5G in. Wi-Fi refresh, new technology coming in, or just a connectivity, you know, the BU saying, hey, I need this connectivity to build it, and they will come. So we kind of have these categories of how we would bring it in and what that would be like. And again, it is kind of use case driven. I mean, I don't want to say it's not, but you can't look for just waiting on your heels for that one, because then you're doing one project and you're just, it's 2 years and you're waiting on the next one.
Great, thank you. So I would say probably the most fun I've had on this account is us starting to work with you on some international deployments. Can you kind of walk us through what it's like deploying, not necessarily wireless on an international level, I'm saying more of the P5G on an international level. What are you experiencing? How's, you know, because every country is a little bit different. How's that process kind of flowed internally as you talk to folks over in EMEA, and you know, we've talked with your Chinese team, and now we're working with Latin America. What has that experience been like as you kind of look into these other regions?
I want you to say how that's been fun. It's been like, man, it's been pretty stressful because it's pretty easy in America. The CPRs is sitting there, we just go. No, but you know, there's regions of the world that it's pretty easy to stand up as well, and then there's regions of the world it's like, wow. You know, you know, we're part of, there's some different 5G consortiums out there, you know, that I suggest everybody get involved in, you know, whether it's the 5G OT Alliance or OnGo or, you know, whatever else is out there. You need to get involved in communities out there. It's been great for Cargill to be involved in some of them, you know, to lean on other, you know, like industries to get, you know, what they've done, what their trials and tribulations have been, and so that's been good for us to say, how'd you get into that country? And so that's helped us, sharpen that, curve down, narrow it down. Getting into those countries, it was kind of scary at first, but it really went very similar to what we did in America, as far as the payback, the model. But then, the Amsterdam one that's where the dog's at for us, and that's an awesome thing, and they, I can't bring that, for some reason I can't get nobody in America
That's the
wants
Boston Dynamics dog.
Yeah,
so you
nobody
don't
in
think
America,
that, we have
nobody
dog
in America
tags
wants
and,
the dog,
okay.
I don't know why. I can't get a Cargill plant to get the dog in America, and they want it over there, and they've got the Amsterdam plant, within like the first 60 days, if you don't know the dog, we have predictive maintenance. I know a lot of you guys have. And in America, in Cargill plants in America, we usually send a team out, and they walk the same path. They do the same measurements, whether it's vibration analysis or heat analysis or whatever, all day. And then they build a database of it, and they try to look. Well, in Amsterdam, the dog does it, and he does it at the same time, same points, predictive, boom, boom, boom. In America, when the human does it, well, it's not the same time. It's not the same path. They stop and talk about their kids. It's great interaction, but they stop, talk about their kids' soccer games or, whatever happens. And so the data is flawed then. The data is not flawed. Same time, same path, boom, boom, boom. And so they had a huge win within the first 60 days of a huge predictive failure that paid for the dog +5. Right out of the gate it found a vibration failure that was going to happen right out of the gate. And you're like, well, that's something, and so that's it was a big win for not us, but that program. So, and plus, I don't know if you've ever seen the video, but if you go out on YouTube and you search, Amsterdam Cargill dog, you can see a video of it. I love to watch it go up and down the steps, but anyway, it's just a sidebar. But yeah, it's been fun.
So, kind of as we start to wrap up here, you're in front of a lot of very influential individuals in the industry here. If you had to speak directly to them, what does the industry need to do to support somebody as forward-thinking as Cargill? What do you need from folks in this room to make this an even bigger splash?
Well, I think we're stronger together, number one. I'm a big advocate of the 5G, arena. I mean, I think we're still kind of fragile as an industry, for sure. So that's scary. Vendors specifically, I told this story yesterday. So, I'll tell the AGV story. So we've got a plant that does eggs in northern Iowa for McDonald's. And that seems important to me. Big account. We're putting AGVs in there. Company called Mirror. Big company, big thing for Cargill. We're talking with the sales guy. He says, doesn't do 5G. Seriously. No. I'm not able to get to the company because the project team boxes me out of that. And so I'm like, seriously, all right, whatever. And I happened to go to Future Tech in Atlanta the next week. And on the floor, rolling around, is a Mirror AGV. And I go, what the hell's that? And they go, I go, what's that on? They go, it's on our 5G. I go, seriously? They go, yeah. I go, did you do that? No, nope, it come from Mirror that way. Really? So I start digging into it. Yep, sure. You know what? Mirror has a 5G AGV, And so I back in the back way to that. We're dealing with like a subsidiary of Mirror, and their salespeople aren't talking to the right area of Mirror to understand that Mirror does have a support area for 5G, and they're just not communicating down the stack. And that is a complete miss because we're a Cisco house. The next day, I'm sitting at a technology board meeting with Cisco, and I asked them, I say, hey, we're doing AGVs for a plant with McDonald's. I've got their IT/OT lead up there, and I say, what should we do with you with AGVs? And he says, not Wi-Fi. And I looked at the rest of the Cargill team, because that's what we're doing at this eggs plant with McDonald's and with Mir. And, so there's this huge disconnect in this whole fabric of the string we're pulling. They want to do their curb product, of course, but he also mentions P5G. He mentions those two technologies. So, as a vendor, some of you guys out here, whether it's Digi or whoever else out here, so you've got salespeople that don't know you've got a 5G product, out representing you. That's a miss up and down your stack. So, we have to have better communication all the way through your company. Not only have people saying, I need to have better 5G products, even if you have it, your sales staff have to know you have it. And when a company like Cargill says, hey, can you have this? Because what's going to happen is we're going to have these AGVs on Wi-Fi, and we all know they're going to have issues. And we're going to have those things stop and start and go back home and, play safe. And we're going to have a whatever situation with our, area of the facility with McDonald's eggs. And, here we are, with that whole situation.
Get our Egg McMuffins, that's a problem.
Yeah, seriously, and I'd be okay doing it with a lesser customer, but I don't think we ought to do it at a plant that's serving McDonald's.
So, Robert, this is probably a little scary for me, but I want to open up the floor for you to kind of just, you've done a great job of kind of telling the ecosystem what you need. What would you say are, anything that I call it the gotcha moment, or what has kind of, on this journey, you've really started to kind of morph into this P5G first movement. Is there anything that's taught you? Is there anything that you kind of want to leave with this group here today? They take home and tell their leadership?
I would just say be bold. Just where you think you can't go, go. You just got to take the bull by the horns and push the envelope. And, where if somebody says, I can only do this little thing, or I can only do one use case, you've got to go past that. Like, I tell my folks all the time, I'm old, I understand, I know where Wi-Fi started, and this is gonna, we have to start treating this like a technology that's connectivity technology the same way we do Wi-Fi. It has to be a fabric of the connectivity at a corporate center, and we have to start, I call it the little kids table at a wedding. We have to stop putting it at the little kids table at the wedding. It has to be at the main table with the other connectivity offerings. And until it's there, we as a group in here are at risk, in my opinion.
Great. Well, the one thing I want to, Robert, thank you very much for joining us today. And I do want to call out, it takes a village to do this. And there's Pete and Rick that you brought along, and I'm sure that they're very passionate about this. So today at breaks or such, seek these guys out and pull them aside and learn from them, because it's been an absolute just amazing journey that we've been on with you, and we appreciate you coming out today. And I think we've got a little time. Maybe we can take some questions. Is that possible? We'd love to, if anyone has any questions, we would love to take this time to hear from you guys.
Any questions?
Have you done anything neutral host with the carriers?
No, we really haven't. We've talked about it a lot, but we struggle with where that would do to, we talk a lot about employee productivity out on the floor. Some of our meat facilities and some of our other facilities, we just do a lot of talking about it, a lot of kicking the tires, but we don't do a lot of real, we're more worried about getting the connectivity problem solved, not go into that next round.
Not even from a safety standpoint for being able to call 911, or are there already mechanisms in place for that?
No, because a lot of our facilities are really heavy on the Motorola radios, and they do a safety thing with them. They have their own, they've already solved that problem through that whole thing. So they have that safety network already established there. But we do think there's a huge, rolling up of what we do, next generation of that, But I mean, yeah, I think we're going to get there eventually, but I think there's still a gap there on where we're at. And, I think Celona has some great leaning in products that's going to make it easier to say we're ready to do neutral host at scale. I think before it would have been like we're not ready to lean into that. So I think Celona's positioned us better to do some of that, would be my opinion.
Just a quick question. When you started the talk, you mentioned the number of PCN, private cellular networks you deployed. I didn't catch the number. And my second question is, what's the smallest network you deployed and what's the largest?
The smallest is probably 2 radios. Probably a football field and a half probably is the smallest. And the largest is probably, probably 32, 33. I don't know. I'm looking back at Pete and Rick. Am I in the ballpark, guys?
They're conferring back with each other. They don't want to.
25? All right. I always bump it up a little bit because I like to go on the high now. So.
And to Andy's point, it's about 60 networks you've deployed globally?
Yeah, it's about 60, yeah.
And let's bring that in. That's in a little over a year.
Yeah, so we started March. We started March 25.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the part I think is the exciting part here is 60 plus networks in a year and maybe a half.
Yeah.
It's very amazing.
So we buy all of our equipment through NTT, and so we lean on them a lot for that. We lean on Celona a lot to help us with what that network should look like. So we do a lot of that. And then we have great cable installers that we use. We have probably 3 that we lean on. And so we'll go out and do a site survey of what the site should look like, and Celona will go usually with us on that. So we'll say, here's where the radio should be. And then we'll schedule the cable installer, and usually when he goes back, we have the radios there, we'll have the core there, and that stuff will get installed then. And we have kind of a pre-sheet of what our outsourcer needs to do for the network, and the network is built ahead of time, so we know what ports we're plugging everything into ahead of time. So when that cable installer leaves the site is ready, and then remotely, somebody like a Pete or a Rick or another person on my team will build the site remotely, and we'll do the testing, the validation, and the site's done. So a small site that's 2 to 5 radios, they were doing 2 a week at one time, and just bang, 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 bang. So, Ryan, who sits beside you, Ryan was taking emails from us like nobody's business, and we were like, go Ryan, go Ryan, go, and we were getting quotes out of him. I mean, yeah, he had the lost summer with us last summer probably. He spent a lot of time, and a lot of long hours putting quotes and getting us equipment, and we were going, and yeah, it was something.
So I take it they also mount, like the cable installers also mount the gear. Is that safe to say?
What's
the
that?
Cable installers also mount the gear. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, the cable
during
installer.
that time as well.
Yep. So we kind of did the first 2, hand in hand, but then like I said, trusted cable installer. We kind of showed them what we needed done, and yeah, we had them, sort of what I would call certified. Here's what we need, and we rolled then. Yeah.
Of those 60 networks, how many of those were absolutely standalone OT networks, and how many were incorporated into the corporate LAN environment? And if it was the latter,
none of them were
how
standalone.
much resistance was there to that?
None of them were standalone. Every one of them. When we did Wi-Fi at Cargill, and I come from the IT OT kind of environment. I always played in between that, and I thought when we did Wi-Fi at Cargill, so early, one of the mishaps we did is we only did it on the IT side, you know, because we didn't know the OT network was going to do anything, right? And so then when OT said, hey, we need something, we didn't have it. So then we did a segmentation model, Purdue model, whatever you want to call it. Probably I was very deep into that, one of the architects of that. We probably started that 10 years ago at Cargill. And so when we started this journey, we sat down, we started architecting it. We said, we are going to put both networks in this P5G arena. So every one of our installs has what I call admin and protected. And so every one of that has both networks setting there. A lot of times the protected network is just sitting there and it's not being used, but as soon as that site wants, you know, anything on that protected site, whether it's, you know, any type of I/O or PLC or a temperature, you know, they're like, hey, I got to go out on this tank and get, you know, some sort of outdoor reading on it, you know, whatever that may be, or I have a conveyor up on the top of a grain silo and I want a positioning sensor on it. Yep, it's ready out there, you know, let's just get it up there and get power to it, you know, and the signal's going to, you know, we can get it on the cellular network, we're good. So we put both networks at every install, just sitting there, and we segment it back, and we don't do that on the cellular network. We pop that off on two VLANs, and we put that on our side and bring it back on us and segment it on our side. So we do that on our networking. But yeah, it's been great to do that way.
I'm curious, as you have had these deployments, as you're looking towards future deployments and the future of connectivity in Cargill, what is your vision for dual Wi-Fi and private network, or do you see private network replacing Wi-Fi in the long term or short term or at any point in the future?
I don't think private 5G will ever replace Wi-Fi, in my opinion. I think the carpeted space is pretty sacred ground. I just don't see it. I mean, that money is, I wouldn't call it sunk cost, but it's pretty committed cost. I mean, I am curious, you know, when we get into talking about neutral hosts, you know, and getting into that area, but, and there's just I go back to the, you know, the consumer-facing companies haven't adopted, they have to do a ton of work. The Dells and the Samsungs really have to go, because I don't know if you guys, raise your hand if you have trouble with Dell doing anything P5G, if you've even tried it. I mean, it is a effing deal. So, or Samsung, for the love of God. So, you know, you can get a Samsung phone on P5G, but it's a 455-step process. You can get an Apple on P5G, it's 2. You know, so I mean, I think there's a lot that has to happen there, you know, so that can change, you know, the opinion can change in 2 years, by far, you know. It's a great technology, but I really think it fits on the plant floor. So that's where the sweet spot to me is out there in manufacturing for this, or, you know, airports, or, you know, those type of use cases is where this sits. If this tries to go after corporate America, you know, in the carpeted spaces, I think you're going to see, you know, the bigs come in and try to squash this, and then you're just going to fight. You know, it's going to be the beta, you know, VHS fight, in my opinion. And why you want to fight that fight? Right now, you're in a space to where they're not fighting you. So keep in that space, and go make headway. You know, while you can go out there and make hay, go make hay. That's my opinion.
For us device manufacturers, what do you think is missing? Like within a private network, what kind of devices do you think might be missing? And also, are you familiar with RedCap, and have you thought of anything in that space?
Missing, I just think integration. I mean, you know, more devices, more integration. You know, there's just not a lot of there's just not a lot of devices out there. I mean, we just struggle with everything and anything. You know, I mean, our tablets, intrinsically safe tablets is a great example. You know, so we have areas in our plants that are that way. So, you know, there may be 2 manufacturers that are working in that space now. And, you know, so we have an area of our BU that wants no operating system thin tablets. And so they're running Wi-Fi on them, you know, so they don't want to patch them. They don't want any, they're OT specific, and they don't want any of the IT, you know, patching schedule, you know, so they don't want any of that crapola, right? And so they're in the thin world, and there's no P5G offering for that. And so I could probably do, I don't know, Pete's back there, we could probably do 35 plants in the next 6 months if I had a thin tablet, right, Pete? I mean, just boom. And they would be big time plants, you know, and they would just roll. So, you know, find telematic fork trucks. Cargill, you know, fork trucks and safety is going to be a huge thing in this industry, and they are all Wi-Fi. All Wi-Fi. You know, anybody that's doing any new technology that's putting it on Wi-Fi is just like, that goes out on the manufacturing floor, you just have to go, why are you doing that? So it's okay to do Wi-Fi, but why aren't you doing both? You know, dual it. So that would be, I don't know.
I have a simple question, and just this is your opinion. How long before this replaces the Motorola radios?
You know, I think it's quicker than what we think. I mean, I think Motorola keeps, their price has increased every year, you know, and it's getting really to be bad. But I think, you know, we talked about this in the CAB meeting yesterday, the advisory board. That Motorola network at our facilities hardly, you know, is pretty reliable. And so that's an issue, right? So if you're putting it on public cellular, that's a huge issue because that doesn't work throughout the facility. So if you're putting it on private, well, now you got to cover everywhere, inside, outside, admin, you know, you got to cover every nook and cranny. So giddy up.
What about a greenfield site like a new LNG plant? What's your thoughts?
What's that?
A greenfield site, a new facility.
Yeah, I wish we built one of them.
There's going to be some.
You know, not a lot of people build
Not a lot
new.
anymore, yeah.
You know, but yeah, if you're building new, that would, yeah. So I mean, I think you know, yeah. I mean, Cargill, my leadership took me to an Amazon plant, you know, and said, hey, let's go look at that. And I'm like, what do you think of that? And I go, let's build new plants. I'd love to do this.
Robert, I can't thank you enough, and that's coming from a Celona employee, but really for the industry. Again, I think it, you know, what was brought up about you sharing your vision with the industry is very important. So thank you for your time today, and thank you to everyone that participated today.